Destroy the child. Corrupt them all.
Here's another disastrous effect of the SJW crowd. There's so many basic bitches now where it's either or, either alt-right or SJW, one extreme or the other. You got your bell curve people on one side, and then you've got everybody's fill in the blank with some sort of epithet, whether it's racism, sexism, homophobia, blah, 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 blah. Your virtue signaling faggots on the other side. And neither one knows anything about anything. I made a trailer about a film that the question was, what's keeping Africa down? And immediately everyone assumed, oh my gosh, he's blaming Whitey. That's what it's going to be. Oh, the answer is IQ. Because there's an IQ gap on average between races, and that explains everything. No, it doesn't really. North and South Korea have the same race, the same language, basically the same IQ, yet vastly different outcomes. Ireland has higher IQ than Britain, on average. But you can't really measure success like that. Britain dominates them in every industry, every measuring stick you could pull out. Britain is far more successful than Ireland, sad to say. But they have a lower IQ. And they have the same language and pretty much the same racial makeup. Maybe not currently with all the refugees pouring into the UK, but there's a lot of states where the IQ is, parts of China. Like, it doesn't matter. What matters is your economic system. If you have communism, you're going to fail. If you have bad economic system, you will fail. Theocracies fail. What makes states successful are free markets. And problems in Africa, I'm definitely not blaming Whitey. I had somebody else pull, well, what about the farmers in South Africa? Well, jackass, if you actually watch the film, the big segment of it is on South Africa and talking about white farmers being run off their private property and shot and burned and tortured and all the things that are happening to white farmers. I talk about everything. There's plenty of domestic corruption in Africa. I laid into different African leaders specifically with specific examples of the types of corruption in Nigeria, in Somalia, where you can look at Al-Shabaab, you can look at Boko Haram, but there's really barely a difference between those terrorist groups in the police in each country, because the police routinely rape and torture and murder people in Nigeria as well. It's an extreme level of corruption. They still have Bantustans. There are also exterior forces. It's not pick A or B. That's what a basic bitch does. They want to blame everything on one and not see the rest. Yes, there's domestic corruption. There's an abundance of resources in Africa, more than any continent, but they get squandered. And a lot of it actually does come from external sources. You've got neocolonial models. You got the perpetual debt system of the IMF. You have a slew of NGOs and UN support where the humanitarian aid, the charity industrial complex actually undermines African agency. It undermines their entire agrarian sector. For example, how are farmers supposed to compete with free food coming in? The aid, it sounds nice, but what you're doing at the same time, if you have extended aid for a period of time, is you're undermining the productive sector of their economy to create their own food. If you can't go to the market and sell your product because you're competing with things that are free or, pennies, then you can't stay in business and you can't put the capital in that it takes to grow whatever you're growing or be a rancher or what have you. If someone else is giving it away for free, that's one of the problems with communism too. They want price controls. They say, oh, we're going to lower the price so everyone can have something. Well, then you end up with shortages because everybody buys it right away because things are really cheap. But then the producers of those same goods say, well, let's say if you put a price gap on eggs and eggs are 10 cents, a dozen or something, then they're not going to produce eggs because it costs too much. The price you can sell them for is lower than what it costs to create them, then you're not going to be a chicken farmer. And so you end up with no eggs. And then you can't just sit there and constantly get new aid, new aid, new loans, new loans. You can't get loans from Europe and pay for them with loans from China and then do that in a circle. And that's kind of the stuff that's going on in a lot of African nations. Not everyone. I gave some examples of success stories too, but there's a lot of very specific economic models. I chose Africa. It could have been Haiti. It could have been Eastern Europe. It could have been Greece. It could have been any place. And a lot of the same things still apply. I did a case study into Glencore with the copper mining, and I explained transfer pricing. I went over the different methods of colonialism, tax evasion, corruption. It's just a film about what's going on. I'm not blaming races. I'm not talking about IQ. I'm definitely not blaming Whitey or acting like, oh, only blacks are the victim. You know, a lot of these mercenary armies, this has to do with the Middle East too. They benefit from Sudanese mercenaries. Guess who's fighting in Yemen right now for the UAE? Sudanese mercenaries. A lot of people turn to soldiering when they're starving. And they will starve because of a lot of things I had to explain. I mean, Sudan was divided in North and South Sudan. Oil's in the south. Pipelines and port access are in the north. You can see how that would pose a problem, which it has, and it does. There are a lot of geopolitical factors going on in Africa. And you can roll this over to different cities within the United States. Some of them thrive, some of them fail. And no, it's not the racial makeup. You can look at Detroit versus Charleston, for example. Exact same demographics, but one's a port city with success that hasn't caved into the unions and liberal policy, etc. And Detroit is a total shithole. They've had nothing but Democratic mayors, you know, a string of them, giving away other people's money, and it's just it's a disaster. And there is not an ethnic component to political philosophy or economics. There's no racial component to being a Republican, for example. Like, anybody can be a Republican. Black Republican, Arab Republican, white Republican, male, female, whatever. It's an ideology. It's not based on your genes. Anybody can be a liberal or an idiot. It's not based on genes. Anybody can be stupid. Anybody can, well, have good intentions and just not understand that constantly giving somebody charity creates a dependency. It creates the welfare state undermines labor. I mean, why should you work if you can maintain all your leisure time and still get about the same income? Well, you wouldn't. And they don't. People collect unemployment. They don't go to work. They collect a check because it's enough. But by not having that labor pool, the industries in your area don't grow. They don't expand. And so there aren't going to be more jobs. But people do have more kids, and you can't just put them all on welfare forever. Charity hurts. Welfare doesn't work in the way that it's constructed. And you can scale this up. It doesn't work for nations either. I mean, a government, every time money goes through a middleman, less and less of it end up where it was supposed to go. Haiti's another good example. Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a complete sad disaster of people eating sand cookies, and I mean, but I think they raised over $13 billion in aid, and how much of that actually went to building infrastructure for clean water or anything sustainable. The Red Cross built like 7 houses and took all those millions of dollars and what? Spend it on administrative costs. The thing is, when somebody's a charitable organization, they're sort of untouchable. They have this angelic standpoint, like, oh, the end of paternalistic racism too. I'm helping the little people who can't help themselves. Well, they can help themselves, but not if you're going to undermine their agency. Not if you're going to, like in the case of Haiti, undermine their democratically elected president and put in a clown, an actual circus clown, as a replacement, because they'll do your bidding. That's what the Clintons did. And Oxfam and these groups from the UK are down there raping kids, engaged in bestiality. Look that up, Oxfam, Haiti. Bestiality. orgies, pedophilia. These are aid organizations. Because there's such a disparity in power, they can go to these little 13-year-old girls, boys, whatever, and they'll do whatever. Because they're starving, it could be after a natural disaster, but the earthquake is not as bad of a disaster as so much government. And the UN's like the good cop and the good cop, bad cop relationship. I mean, they go there and they have their peacekeeping forces with their machine guns and everything else. And you got groups like UNICEF with Tony Lake, a CIA guy going in to become a charity guy. And they're arming all these rebel groups. But they need them. They need that proxy army so they can send these mercenaries into places like Syria, which is happening. It's documented. They need that. You have to wreck an area, grab your mercenary soldiers, and then go wreck another area with them. The British used to do that with the Indians all the time. Anyway, it's a complex issue. I made a film about it. It's on Vimeo on demand. I do talk about the plight of everyone. It's not a social justice warrior type of film. And you IQ people, I wish you guys would sign up for a debate, because you do well in your own echo chamber. And you might do well against some social justice warrior that they're also identitarians just like you. And I think social justice warriors are also prejudiced. They have paternalistic racism. They think they're above others and they got to help these lesser races and stuff. I see that white condescension, that kind of backhanded compliments and stuff, like lowering standards for certain groups is racist. If you say, oh, we're just gonna lower the standard for this group or the other to get into college because, well, we all know they can't compete on the same standard. I mean, that's racism. That is a slap in the face. Affirmative action is a slap in the face. It's racist. And they act like the opposite. It's always projection. They're all like, oh, no, you're a racist for not following along with my racism. If you're Asian, East Asian, you have to have the highest scores, much higher than anyone else, to get in the same schools. It's like the best within your category instead of the best just being the best. It should be based on merit. Otherwise, someone will get in over their head. They could have gone to a good school with the grades and all and their aptitude, but instead they end up going to a great school and they're at the bottom of the class and struggling, and maybe they drop out. It's just because of your alt-right types that are all, talking about my ethno-state and all that stuff. When someone like me brings up why they're against affirmative action or why they're against illegal immigration, I'm always met with, oh, you racist crap. And on the flip side, when I talk about imperialistic policies that are real, there are predatory loans that do decimate third world countries. There are mercenary armies. We do these things. The CIA does assassinate leaders and replace them with more complacent people. It's, oh, you're such an SJW. I mean, you just can't win a few people. Eat a dick.